Hi, I'm Isaac Sacolick, the author of Digital Trailblazer. Welcome to the author interview series. This is our episode on Chapter 8, Transformative Cultures, Empathetic Teams, and Diverse Leaders. It is probably one of the most important chapters in the book, and I hope you enjoy this interview. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Digital Trailblazer author interview series. I'm here with Ginny Hamilton, a CIO community editor and the editor of Digital Trailblazer. How's it going, Ginny?
Hey, Isaac, it's going great. I'm excited to be here to talk about chapter 8 with you, which was the DEI and leadership teams chapter. And you and I worked on this chapter a lot together. We really wanted to make sure that readers related to the stories and understood the lessons in this chapter. And so I'm wondering, can you just kind of start out by talking about the backstory and what led you to write this chapter to begin with?
Yeah, as I was writing chapter by chapter of the book, leading into COVID, before COVID, and I was at conferences and I would bounce ideas across different leaders that I was meeting there. And I would talk about the story. Yeah, I'm going to write another book. It's going to come out in X. And, one CISO came up to me after I did a panel on DEI and technology leadership in women. She said, Isaac, if you're going to write another book and tell your stories and really leave leadership lessons, you better have a chapter here around diversity and inclusion. And
Mhm.
I took a step back and I had to give some pause and think about it, just because, look, I'm a white male in a white dominated, male dominated industry.
Yeah.
And I'm going to talk about diversity and inclusion, which after thinking about it more was really a big part of my success story. I didn't know it at the time, but I looked back and reviewed my team sizes, my team makeups, what my leadership team was. It was a very big part of how I thought about things when I brought people together to brainstorm ideas or solve problems. And I said, something, she's right. This is going to be a very challenging chapter. I remember talking to you about single uses of words that I had chosen, or how a sentence was coming out, or I think we scratched one or two stories out of it because they were good stories, but they didn't really tell a good story about DE&I. And we ended up where we are, and it was a real aha moment for me. So I think it's very important for me. As you read this chapter, think about how you work with your teams, who's on your team, how you think about hiring, how you think about putting job descriptions out, and come back to me and share your feedback with me. Tell me this is how this chapter made you feel, or ask me a question, or even tell me something I missed around it. We're all here to learn from our experiences and make things better. And this was a really important chapter for me.
I know that it was. And I know it was also too just about like the diversity of skill sets and being surrounded by people with different backgrounds and experiences so that you can be successful. I think it's really one of the key chapters for CIOs and CDOs and IT leaders about how they can form a leadership team of digital trailblazers that can really execute on a vision. And so maybe you can talk about the backstory on that.
Yeah, it was sort of an aha moment once. I was talking to another CIO a bunch of years ago, and he was kind of new at the role,
Mhm.
but a very experienced IT leader. I think he was actually more experienced than I was in a lot of different areas. And he said, Isaac, how do you manage your time? I mean, between working with executive stakeholders, going out to see customers, trying to lead teams on new technologies, like I really struggle with how to balance my time. It was sort of an aha moment for me because that is one of the hardest things CIOs have to learn to deal with. We're so used to getting into the weeds and solving problems. We want to be with our teams, learning how technologies are working. I'm very passionate around
Yeah.
agile and DevOps and data, but as you grow up in the ranks, this, Jay, you have less time to spend with your teams. You're spending time maybe with your operations team when you're resolving a crisis, when you're budgeting, you're spending a lot more time with your marketers and your innovation teams and your executives to make sure you're prioritizing the right things. When you think about transformation and you're trying to lead agile ways of working or look for new opportunities to bring data and analytics to your organization, you're really relying on your lieutenants to take your vision forward, right? How do you take the priorities? How do you work with individual teams and individual people? How do you put people together to solve problems in a meaningful way? And so, I wanted to tell that story of how important it was to really think about the makeup of your team. What's the right personality? How do you get a diverse background of people? How do you compensate when you can't hire for all the skills that you want to have on your team? Where are you going to spend your time, and where are you going to rely on your lieutenants to educate you on how to solve problems? All that plays out in forming a leadership team. And so I think chapter 8, between the diversity discussion and forming your leadership team, is probably the most important chapter in the book.
And you talk about leaning on your lieutenants. In this chapter, you also lean on some of your peers, with these folks that you have co-mentoring relationships with. You asked them to share their lessons and their perspectives on things. I think it's the only chapter where you did that. I can't remember for sure,
It's
but
the only one.
it is. Okay, yeah. Can you talk more about why this is, why you invited them in, and why co-mentoring relationships are important?
Yeah, let's start with the co-mentoring. I mean, for me, um, I talk about this in the book. As you grow into larger leadership ranks, it's really hard to open up and share your feelings with other people. It's so incredibly important. It's a very, very stressful job. You have a target on your back as you're running transformation. And there are going to be times when you have a lot of expertise and knowledge and background in an area, and there are going to be times where you're completely void, that you need somebody to ask questions to. And so when you talk about networking, and I use the word co-mentoring, I'm talking about other CIOs, other executives that I can lean on, that I could share expertise with, but I'm also learning from. And
yeah,
I just felt it was the perfect chapter to bring that leadership lesson in. I include a few people in there. Helen Knight is a nonprofit CIO. I've learned a ton from her about how to bring technology for good. She and I met almost every other week during COVID, just trying to deal with all of life's surprises during that. So, very important to me during that very difficult period of time. Martin is, we see a lot of things very similarly in terms of operations, agile, innovation, security, but he uses different language than I do. I'll use the word transformation management. He uses the word change management, and we rationalize how we think about these two different disciplines that are very related, obviously, but we talk about them to see, where there's commonality, where there's differences. JJ, also, he left a nice comment in the book. JJ is very passionate about DEI, very passionate about leadership and mentoring. He has a strong mentoring program out in Atlanta. So these are my co-mentors. I felt it important to include them in the book, bring their wisdom into this chapter around diversity. And trust me, their thoughts and their ideas have permeated throughout the book, because I'm always sharing and learning from these people.
Yeah, definitely. And I thought it was a cool way and the exact right place to bring in some other voices and other perspectives directly related to the topic on the chapter on diversity, diverse opinions, diverse backgrounds. So really well done. So with that, Isaac, I will toss it back to you.
Thanks, Ginny, and thanks everybody for watching this author interview series with Ginny and I around chapter 8 about the importance of diversity and inclusion and forming your leadership team. Chapter 9 is all about how to sell innovation to the C-suite, another really important chapter. And I look forward to seeing you at that video when we record it. Speak to you then. Thanks for watching this episode of the Digital Trailblazer author interview series. Please sign up for my YouTube channel and subscribe. That's the Driving Digital Stand-Up. And if you buy the book, Digital Trailblazer, you'll learn how to get access to the Digital Trailblazer community, where I have tons of more content and videos to accelerate your learning around digital transformation. Thank you and have a great day.